Daniel Assis, who will talk about self-serving mediums. Daniel Assis has been an active participant in the Spiritist movement in California for over 15 years and has spoken throughout the U.S. and abroad. Passionate about education, Dr. Assis works with public schools and education reform in California. Daniel holds a doctorate degree in education and a master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from the University of Southern California, and is also a credentialed project management professional. Daniel is a member of the board of directors at Blossom Spiritist Society in Los Angeles and lives in San Diego with his wife Nicole and son David. So let's welcome Daniel.
Good afternoon. When new matters arise, new words are needed to avoid the confusion inherited in using the same word to express different meanings. This is a powerful sentence we would have first seen and read in the Spirit's book when it was published in 1857. Had we been there to open the first edition. But fortunately, the editions that followed maintain that as well. And they all speak to the clarity that Spiritism seeks to bring to us. You see, Spiritism, as it was first started in 1857, is really, as Kardec defined, a science which deals with the nature, origin, and destiny of spirits, as well as their relationship to the corporeal world. And as such, it is really a progressive body of knowledge. If Spiritism started in 1857, it has never stopped. It continues to grow, to change. And it speaks to its very accommodating nature. You see, Spiritism is about constant inquiry, constant exploration, constant reflection, constant reevaluation. And as such, it continues to grow and grow and grow. And it's also, as we said here, not the product of just one single mind, but of many who have come together to strengthen this body of knowledge, to give it credence and credibility. And so the picture of Kardec we put here, for us, is symbolic of that idea. One man bringing together the concept of many minds to form one bigger picture. So in 1857, the 18th of April, in the Palais Royal in Paris, when the Spirit's book was first published, published. Let's try that again. Published, because we're about constant involvement and perfection. Published. When it was first published in 1857, it marked a new era. An era in which not only had we then acquired a new set of ideas and knowledge, but one in which we had also learned a new method, not only to acquire knowledge, but to put it in practice and perfect ourselves. The Spirited method, then, is at the core at everything that we do. It is about constant evolution. And today, we honor a lot of that process by celebrating the Spiritist Review, the magazine, the periodical that Kardec made available to us, so that we could first try some steps with some of the new content on an ongoing basis, continuously, before they were then published into books. And that's one of the beautiful things about Kardec's approach and of Spiritism itself. It is a coherent philosophy. It's one of constancy and continuation. And so it does what it preaches. If we are talking about evolution, and constant progress, we also see that Spiritism itself did that. And Kardec elaborated on that by constantly testing new ground, new articles, new ideas in this beautiful magazine that circulated around, gathered feedback before it would then return and eventually be the seed to all the books that we now have and call the Spiritist compilation or the Spiritist codification. It's an ongoing process. But what's really beautiful about all of that is that at the core of Spiritism, as the name itself implies, is the spirits. Therefore, mediumship is also at the core of everything that we talked about. And because of this approach that we have discussed here of constantly moving forward and evaluating, a lot of our studies have focused on how to best employ this great tool of knowledge, which is mediumship. And so I have the task today of talking to you about something you already know. Hopefully you won't sleep, or if you do, you won't snore. But as we do that, it is important for us to remember that this is the Spiritist perspective, that there are other perspectives out there, and that as we learn through Spiritism, we value, respect, and are interested in different perspectives. So the Spiritist perspective was yielded through our studies from the many books and the many publications. And what we hope to share here today is how we see that mediumship can be best employed to yield its best fruits, to provide us with the greatest guidance possible so that we can be better. Because we have spent quite a bit of time as Spiritists worrying about mediumship and trying to study it, we think we have some good material to share. But again, we've also learned that free will, tolerance are very important. So by no means is this the only way of practicing mediumship. We know the mediumship was not invented by Spiritism. We know that we are only adding another layer of instruction to make sure that we're practicing in a more organized and more effective manner. Therefore, we use sometimes different words. So far, so good? And so what we try to do here in our brief 30 minutes we have together is to point to some factors that lead to the implications on the title of our talk, which are: the best way to practice mediumship is with a intentional disinterestedness, without personal gain for the medium. And by that I mean not only financial gain, but any kind of gain. Because self-serving people are not after just money. They might be after any means necessary that might give them an advantage, be it moral, be it emotional, psychological, over somebody else. So when we're talking about self-serving mediumship, we're not talking only about charging for mediumship monetarily, but also through influences or quid pro quos, when I scratch your back and you scratch my back. What we say is that mediumship should be practiced without any interest at all from the part of the medium. That would be the best way, but not the only way, because we respect, again, free will. And so there are 7 items that I would briefly like to cover with you that point us to that idea. We want to share how we arrived at that conclusion today. The first one is purpose. The second one is access to information. The third topic that we want to talk about is ownership of the content at hand. And the fourth one is the credibility involved in the mediumistic process. The fifth one is the impact on the medium's spiritual health, so the health aspect, because that also comes into practice. The sixth one is the influence that mediums have over those who they serve. And the last one, a reward, where reward lies for the process. And so we hope to dive quickly into those 7 different pieces to make our point. Let's dive into the first one, purpose. Here's a picture of God creating Adam that can be found in the Sistine Chapel. And talking about purpose, necessarily leads us to talk about mediumship. So what is mediumship? Mediumship is the ability to serve as an intermediary between the two sides of life. So we know that the medium is involved in connecting the spiritual with the physical. That we probably already know. But what really matters now that we know this is why. Why would we want to do that? Why do we want symbolically to connect with the spiritual world symbolized here by God? Does God need to connect with us? No. Do we need to connect with God? Yes. Is it fair to say that we need God more than God needs us? Probably. So the purpose of mediumship is necessarily to connect us to the divinity, to advance us morally. And now they are beginning to get the hang of this new tool. We know that we must learn how to properly use. So the spirits tell us that the reason why we have mediumship is to act as interpreters of spirits for the instruction of humankind in general, not just one or two people, and to show humankind the pathway to good in its most beautiful form, and also lead us to a rational understanding of the world, which we also call faith. So the purpose of mediumship then is to further human cause. And if we also say that the best medium is the one that is the best interpreter, that is, that has the least amount of influence in the message, we can say that the job of the medium is to remove him or herself from the picture to allow that connection to have. And that is perhaps the first point of full intentional disinterestedness. If the medium wants to remove itself from the picture so the message can be through, it must necessarily remove its ego too. So that's purpose. So the purpose of mediumship is to share. And if we are then having an interest in how we share, then we run into another problem, which is access to the divine message. If mediumship is the messenger of some such messages from the divine to us, then we must provide people access to that information. If, on the other hand, we put obstacles for people to obtain this message, what we are doing here is preventing those who cannot afford it to reach it. And therefore, we are putting hurdles to the presence of God. Imagine for a second that there is Moses coming from Mount Sinai with his 10 commandments, and he goes, "Behold, I bring you 10 commandments for those who are members of my club." Or for those who pay a consultation. Or for those who will do this for me before I share that with you. We would have missed much. Imagine if the great knowledge that we have attained through Jesus, perhaps the best medium of all time, an intermediary between God and us, and any other great leader out there who has decided to lead his people and cause a positive impact in the world. What if they charge for it? What if they put hurdles in it? So access to information is an important piece because we don't want to go into the commerce of faith again. We want to make sure that everybody can reach the Word of God. And if we don't take in consideration those who cannot, quote, pay financially or favor-wise, then we are leaving one part of the creation outside and saying, "I'm so sorry, this is not for you." So because of that, we believe that access to information is important, and that makes our second item. The third concept that we also bring in mind is one that's perhaps one that we talk about most often, which is ownership of the message. In nowadays terms, we can say intellectual property. Who owns the message? Who has the right to charge for it? If the message is yours, by all means, charge it. But that wouldn't be mediumship. To put it in more practical terms, and something that perhaps our modern world can relate to more easily, we have our Pirate Bay right over there. But see, this is not about downloading and using illegal music or videos or whatever it is. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is downloading illegally videos and movies and selling them to somebody else. One thing is for your own use, but the other one is when you get the product of somebody else and you sell it to a third party. It would be akin for me to get the keys of your car and sell it to somebody else without you acquiescing. Probably not the best way to go about. Now, so we need the permission of those who give and own the message to sell it. And in some cases you might have it, and that's okay. But it's important for us to consider that, because oftentimes we'll also come with the idea of, well, I am not really selling the message. I am selling my time. I am also busy. I want to make a living, so I am not selling the message of the spirits. I'm just charging for my time to get the message. Well, that's a valid point. But the question is, what are they there for? Are they there to spend time with you, or they're there to get the message? If you could not get the message, if you could not spend time with the medium and get the message, wouldn't you want that anyway still? So let's make no mistake about it. Charging for a time is an indirect way of us charging for the message according to our perspective. And it's not judgmental. This is what our thinking has led us to believe so far. And also raises another problem in terms of profession. If mediumship is to become a profession, then how do we treat the whole contractual relationship? If I'm contracting you to do something and you do not deliver what I want, should I have a refund policy? Can I ask for it back? Do you have a 30-day money-back guarantee if I don't like the message that I got? Because I pay for it. Right? So these are difficult things that becomes embroiled in our day-to-day challenges. And so the best way to avoid all of that would be to obviously not have a self-serving purpose behind it, not charge it in any shape or form, because it removes all these problems. And he speaks then to the other item that we have, which is credibility. And the first thing is the credibility of the medium, because we read in our very own Spiritist review that the most absolute disinterest is the best guarantee against fraud and self-interest. If you are not asking for anything in return, what they can accuse you of? Can they accuse you of being selfish? Can they ask your credibility? Can they say you have ulterior motives? It will become a lot harder, wouldn't it? So that is very important, because the credibility then becomes the character of the medium. You would look at the medium and look at his life and the fact that he's dedicated to others, and that leads credence not only to the message, but to the general communication as a whole, which brings us to the second part of credibility, which is, it's not about just credibility of the medium delivering the message, but every medium that starts to ask for some kind of repayment also taints the image for all other mediums and for this connection with the spiritual world, for any and all that might want to engage in the communication with the spirits. So there is two aspects of the credibility piece which we must keep in mind as we move forward. And the other interesting piece here too is, if we do start the commerce of faith, we're also opening up a market for those who have no interest at all in serving others, but that just want to scheme them. If we start to make money from this, others will come because they just want to make money, whether they are mediums or not. And so we will see a natural growth in frauds and charlatans, because now they have one extra field to work in and gain money from. So we will be attracting a whole new level of folks who have a mission who is contrary to the very purpose of mediumship. So far, so good? Okay. The other aspect we want to talk about is that self-serving mediums have a potential to have great negative impact on their own spiritual health. What do I mean by that? Well, now that we have studied mediumship extensively, we know that no medium can guarantee that a spiritual communication will actually take place at a certain point in time or a certain hour in time. Because it is a two-way street. We can't force the spirits to do what we want. They pick up the phone on the other side if they want to. So we cannot guarantee that the message will take place. However, if we have made that something so important to us that we really must get the information, either because we are getting some kind of payment in exchange, we find ourselves into a moral conundrum which has severe implications. We might begin to force that connection and seek any kind of connection because we have already taken whatever we call payment, or we need that payment. So we expose ourselves to connect with spirits who might not be the best kind of spirits. And then we give ourselves a whole new kind of spiritual entourage. So the question is, what kind of spiritual entourage do we have? Is this your spiritual entourage? I hope not. But if you're constantly seeking to force a communication with the spiritual world, even when our mentors and guides do not think it's best, you might find yourself having a different kind of folks picking up the phone on the other side. And that, with time, will establish some nefarious, energetic connections with you that will necessarily unbalance you energetically and might lead you to a very difficult and unpleasant state. And we have seen that all too often. Mediums who, for whatever reason, end up falling along the way, and sometimes, if they're lucky, they temporarily even lose the ability to communicate with the spirits as a fail-safe from the divine side to prevent them from incurring more moral debt. But so health for the medium is an important piece, the spiritual piece of it. So it behooves the medium to treat it with intentional disinterest so as to preserve its own psychic and spiritual and energetic resources. It is important for them to do so as well. And obviously the multiplier here is if you depend on the income, then you find yourself in a very difficult situation, because what if that month or those 2 months you're not able to communicate? Then you find yourself in the rabbit hole of more and more forcing the communication, which will lead you into an unpleasant state. And again, this is not about just not about only material financial payment. If you also are gaining status, or you seek some kind of status for the attention of doing it, you also self-serving. You're also establishing very difficult and painful patterns to your future. So far, so good? Okay, make sure you're not sleeping. I know this is very dry and abstract stuff, but thanks for hanging in there. After health, we have a question of influence. And if we have already somewhat established the influence of spirits and their quality of the spirits influencing us, what I mean here by influence is the influence that we, as practitioners of mediumship, have on those who we are helping and serving. We also have certain responsibilities to those who come and seek us, especially because they come generally in a state of emotional fragility or distress. They come generally to a medium seeking solace. They don't come because they're necessarily happy. They come because they're looking for something and they're in a vulnerable state. So we have to be even more careful about the words and the promises we make or imply. And so, what action and what impact and influence do we have on those people? Are we fostering a dependency, or are we empowering them to help themselves? That is to say, are we giving them a hook so they can go fishing and fish for themselves, or are we hooking them into our practice? Because if you are self-serving and you are benefiting from it, we have another conundrum, which is you actually want your client to come back. That's your livelihood. And if you want your client to come back, what you are fostering is the idea of dependency. Come back next month so that we can continue our conversation. And it goes against the very message of the divine, which teaches that we have free will and that we should be working our own problems out to the point that we become as self-sufficient as we can and move on. So the influence that we have on those who come to us is very important. That is not to say that you can't charge for a session and not empower your client. It is very possible. We're not saying that all those who charge are not empowering their clients. We're saying these are some of the rabbit holes that we want to be mindful in the practice of mediumship. Please, by all means, these are not absolutes, as we know. We are saying these are the areas that we must pay attention to make sure that our mediumistic practice is as healthy and positive as possible. And after the influence, then, there's also a question, and the final one, I promise you, is that of reward. Where is it that we want to gain our reward? It is okay to gain our reward here in the material world. But if we give to Caesar's what is Caesar's, we cannot double dip and say, I am getting lots of brownie points in the spiritual world for helping people through mediumship. You are getting paid in this world. You can't double dip and saying you're getting lots of brownie points on the other side. It's one or the other. You can't play both when it suits you. So the question here is, where is it that you want to receive payment for helping others? And we are reminded, of course, of the beautiful passage in Matthew chapter 6, when Jesus reminds us for not to store our treasures on earth, where the moth and vermin destroy it, and where thieves break in and steal it. Instead, gather your treasures and store them in heaven, where moth and vermin cannot destroy it, and where thieves cannot steal it. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Basically calling us the idea of where is our priority? On receiving recognition and payment on earth, or for the acts that we do spiritually, or in the other side. Where is our primary life situated? Are we humans that have a spirit, or are we spirits that have a human experience? We're constantly thinking about us in the physical world and the spiritual side, but in fact it's the opposite. We are spirits temporarily here. So our focus should be first and foremost on our spiritual essence. There is where our heart should be. There is where our treasure should lie. Our focus should be on being prepared to excel there, not financially, monetarily here. So all of that brings us back to the studies that we have carried out as a Spiritist collective that point to the fact that the best kind of mediumship, the most effective kind of mediumship to the obtaining of powerful and great messages that might propel us forth into the future, a much happier future of joy and moral accomplishment, begin with an intentional disinterestedness. If we are mediums, or we partake in mediumship on our side of life, our goal is to remove ourselves and our filters and our egos as much as we can, so that we may let the light of God and His great wisdom shine through. Then we will be perhaps a little bit closer to the divine and understand that mediumship is an incredible tool for our constant spiritual evolution, because it allows us to constantly connect with the divine. It allows us to make an effort, and you can see here, God seems to be making a much big effort than Adam over there to connect with us. But that constant interaction with the spiritual world that Kardec described in the definition of Spiritism we first saw, that is, the Spiritism is a science which deals with the origin, the destiny, and the nature of spirits, as well as their relationship to the physical world. We need to constantly think about the relationship between the spiritual and the physical realms. And mediumship is the tool that allows us to do that. So now that we gain insights into how the process works, we must begin to focus our attention to how to properly employ it. How do we unleash this wave of goodness that may come from an intentional disinterestedness in mediumship in our lives? Never forgetting for a second that we can be mediums also of the spiritual world in all matters, and not necessarily active communication. That we can be intermediaries of the divine by fostering spiritual growth, whatever it may be, and in the assistance and help of others, without ever asking for anything in return. And then, what a wonderful thing it will be when we're able to more and more not only have ourselves in constant connection with the divine, but leverage that to help others connect. Nothing will bring us greater joy than seeing a world where more and more people come away from suffering because they have established a direct connection to the divine and maintain the connection regularly. It will be better for you, for me, and it will be a wonderful world for all of us. And that's probably what Jesus mentioned and alluded to when he said that then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So my sincere wishes to all of us is that we may endeavor to continue and persist in the study and practice of mediumship as guided by and as supported by the greatest soul that has ever laid feet on this planet, the great teacher, the Christ. May you continue to further your studies and advance the practice of your studies to help us all usher in a new era of love and gratitude and fulfillment. And in particular, we record our gratitude to the codificator who has allowed us to continue that study by giving us such a great guideline, a framework to maintain the constant connection with the spiritual world. Thank you, and may God bless you.